Hey, monsters, what's up? We're back at it for week two of Google on Trial. And if you thought last week's testimony really brought the heat, it's getting hot in here. Anyway, I bet you thought week one was really wild, but let me tell you, week two is cranking things all the way up. And surprise, publishers are once again receiving the short end of the stick. I wasn't going to do this. Andrew, I think you might know what I'm getting ready to do, but I think the publisher mantra should be just give me my money, right? That should be the publisher mantra, yeah. But enough of my foolery for today. Let's dig into how Google's ad dominance is being unwrapped like a burrito. That's kind of corny, but we have the rapper newsletter, burrito rapper, get it? All right. Andrew, are you ready to jump into some defense buzzword bingo? What's up with these defense tactics?
I know. Ariel Garcia from Check My Ads has been amazing covering the day to day, but she's also had some fun aspects into it as well. One of the things is the defense word bingo, and she literally created a bingo board with some of the words the defense is using to kind of stray away from the points that the DOJ is saying. Some of the words on the bingo cards that she's saying is brand safety, inventory quality, spam, substantiative chats. But the picture I'm looking at right now, only two X's are crossed, but I'm sure it's gotten a lot worse as the case has gone on. But she also did the crossword puzzle, and she kind of gave different prompts so people can kind of create their own words. Some of the prompts she gave was Google implemented blank pricing rules, even though its publishers' customers adamantly objected to this change. And another one is I would not blank it that way. A standard coerced response of Google employees and Zooglers to evade answering questions directly. So I know she's gotten a little
Whoa.
bit spicy and fun with some of the people who are kind of following the trial. So we won't take it as serious, but to kind of dig into what's been going on, I know one of
Where
the
can people find these like games that she's putting together?
I've
Where have
seen
you even seen them in the wild? Yeah.
Yeah, I've personally seen them on LinkedIn. You can kind of go to Ariel Garcia's page on LinkedIn. I'm kind of looking at one of the posts she did right now, and she just posted the crossword this morning, right? I think.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
I was gonna say I know the answer to your first example. Google implemented unified
Yes,
price.
unified pricing rules. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm, that's cool. That's cool. But to kind of dig into some of the testimonies that happened, one major one was Neil Mohan, who is CEO of YouTube and is a former Google ad tech exec. And one thing he talked about was his testimony focused on Google's acquisition of DoubleClick and the strategy to dominate digital advertising through inventory access, which is the ad server, aggregation, which is the exchange, and monetization, which is the ad network. He was repeatedly coached to emphasize quote unquote choice in the quote unquote two-sided ad tech market, but internal emails, as Ariel Garcia revealed strategies to tightly bundle Google's tools such as the DFP and the ad exchange. In the cross-examination, he relied heavily on the defense buzzwords like innovation and inventory quality, with the DOJ pointing out inconsistencies in his statements about real-time bidding and publisher access to competitive exchanges. And finally, another testimony was Nirmal Jayaram, sorry if I mispronounced that, who is Senior Director of Engineering at Google. And his testimony revealed how Google leveraged AdWeb to poach publisher customers from rival exchanges. Internal documents showed that Google viewed Audib as a tool to keep Google ads relevant across bidding across exchanges and saw significant opportunity to use AdWeb data as a lead list to target and win over publishers from competitive platforms. And Google knew that expanding Audib will impact publisher relationships, basically. And Ariel Garcia kind of focused on some of the defense buzzwords in the cross exchange. They deflected these points by focusing on similar buzzwords like latency, brand safety, and fraud, which they repeatedly used to argue that Google's actions were necessary to maintain quality and efficiency. This tactic persisted even when claims were directly contradicted by internal evidence showing Google's efforts to stifle competition. So it got a little bit spicy during the cross examination, definitely.
So spicy, and I would say a key word for Google, which Ariel may not having her crossword puzzle is diabolical.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, Karen, what you got cooking? Because I think you're going to dig a little deeper into some testimony and unified price rules. I do have something to say about unified price rules myself, but what have you unpacked from week 2?
Well, I just want to say your mention of diabolical just reminded me that I saw that word and heard it a lot this weekend in relation to another case going on with somebody in the music industry, but gonna skate past that. So just to add to Andrew's testimony, from my perspective, Neil really focused on just the work that went into making the ad tech business what it is today, or the display business what it is today. And I feel he really took us down memory lane. It reminded me of, when I first started in ad tech, Lenny, you told me to read Targeted by Mike Smith. A lot of those companies came up again. Um, Andrew already mentioned the 3 parts of Neil's focus, but I want to reiterate them: the platform to access the inventory, the ad exchange to aggregate the inventory, and then the display network to monetize the inventory. So, these 3 sectors really show Google's intent to control the ad tech system. And a lot of the customers who testified said they felt locked in, as you said last week, Lynn, held hostage by Google, only strengthening, these monopoly claims. He went into AdMeld, and he brought up Ben Baracus. Remember, Lynn, when we went to his bar like 2 years ago?
Oh,
So,
yes.
yes,
Ben is fun.
yeah, I know he's like an ad tech godfather. So when we think about the acquisition, Neil mentioned how it filled a product gap. It delivered yield management capabilities quickly. I mean, he said that, but he also discussed how he thought of yield management as an outdated approach, right? He compared real-time bidding to like streaming music, and YM, or yield management to listening to a CD. So, and then Jonathan Belak also agreed. There was an email from him that stated that he said that YM is a workaround for not having real time bids, So then also, sorry, this was a lot. Day 6 was heavy, if you ask me. I mean, I tried to put so much in here, but so in terms of also back to this acquisition, tapping into the fast growing business. So, in an email, he also said, what do you guys think of acquiring one of them, picking up one, that gains the most traction and then parking it somewhere, which pretty much means like, oh, let's buy this platform and let it sit there while we build our own tech stack. So, Google argues that the acquisitions were to improve products, not eliminate competition, but we know they were to eliminate competition. We heard from Brian O'Kelly, one of our Ad Monsters Ops own. Go ahead,
I,
Lynn.
I I want to interrupt you real quick. I think Yakira, and I mentioned it last week, Adam Heimlich from um, Chalice, he wrote that article for us last week. Google is a data broker, and he talked about how that double click and ad meld takeover created this whole auction manipulation and cream skimming that Google would do. So I think it's very interesting that that fully came to light this week in the trial, because Adam was talking about it last week. It was the writing on the wall that he's been studying, all these years. But go ahead.
I mean, it's also interesting to me how a lot of this ad tech history is really being detailed in kind of like the middle of the trial. But speaking of, Brian O'Kelly, we all know he started AppNexus, and he testified that in a closed door meeting with the IAB Tech Lab, Google representatives, they objected to take over prebid.js, and this led to prebid.org, So he also said that when it came to open bidding, he did not want to make AppNexus dependent on Google's business, but of course, that's the way it worked out. So last week was hefty with testimonies. Another one that stood out to me was Scott Spencer's from Google, because he basically told on them by stating they are a monopoly. Another internal email mentioned that their goal should be all or nothing. Use the AdX as your SSP, or don't get access to our demand. It's a key feature, and we need to use it while it's still proprietary to Ad Exchange. And we heard from the Daily Mail. Lynn, I know you're going to add to this. Matthew Wheatland, he highlighted that publishers will lose 28% of revenue if they lost AdX demand. Day 9, we heard from Jonathan Bellick, and he admitted to pushing for open bidding, Jedi, to be slightly better than header bidding based on leadership's guidance. Now, this was interesting because initially, when asked about his goals for combating header bidding, he argued that he wanted to create the best products possible for his publisher customers. So when asked why the guidance was towards Jedi instead of creating the best products possible, he blamed it on leadership, which, as we all know, is easy to do. So lastly, Robert Lee from Harvard, he brought us home. Google has monopolies in every place of the ecosystem. So publisher ad servers, ad exchanges, and ad networks. And AdX wins 50% of the auctions and faces no competition in the 60%. So says a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it was a hefty, hefty week. And I really like the way you two unpacked different testimony. And those internal emails were just really key to what's happening here. So for me, the way I looked at week 2, I put on a publisher cap entirely and thought about what it meant for publishers besides just give me my money, right? Just besides that, I know I'm a fool. Anyway, besides that, what does it really mean for publishers? And I think, Akira, you talked about it last week, that 20% take rate that Google had it's been central to the arguments in this past week. The internal emails show without a doubt that the Google execs knew they were overcharging the publishers, but they kept it that way because it was kind of like, duh, where else are publishers going to access this massive advertiser pool? Where else are they going to get this? So AdX is the gatekeeper, right? And with that exclusivity, um, it just shows the ad tech dominance of Google. It keeps publishers locked in, again, like I talked about last week. But the way I think about it as a metaphor, imagine trying to throw a party, right? You're trying to throw a party, you're trying to have the best people come to your party, but you don't have the guest list. Google has the guest list. Google has the keys, right? So, like any publisher who tries to get out of this setup, it's just not easy. But they're being promised all these best rates and all this other stuff that just does not come into play for them at all. The biggest question of the week for me, though, was does Google ad tech actually benefit publishers? And I don't know if you guys know this, but the judge straight up asked this question in court. Google's defense, of course, argued that publishers benefited from better rates, which is not the case at all. The DOJ had a witness, Abrantes Metz. I think that's how you pronounce the name. He said Google's sneaky peek at competitors' bids made it impossible for publishers to have better rate. Like if Google wasn't sneaking and peeking, then publishers may have had a better chance. And that's where I think Wheatland's testimony really came in strong, because if they tried to move away from this, that 28% revenue hit that you talked about, right? So Google's always winning here. And that's also where unified pricing rules, I think, come into play. Wheatland mentioned that the UPR caused a significant drop in revenue per impressions for the Daily Mail, and he could only cushion it with a traffic boost. So sure, Google threw out terms like we heard in the crossword and the buzz, efficiency and innovation, right, to defend these UPR rules. But the reality is, at the end of the day, it keeps publishers stuck in the ecosystem. But as my brother from another mother, Anthony Vargas over at Ad Exchanger, highlighted last week, these testimonies highlight that publishers are finally being seen. All the BS that publishers have been putting up with for years, now publishers are being seen. Their grievances are being put on center stage. It's not like they're just calling up their Google rep and complaining anymore. the whole world, not just ad tech ecosystem either. At one of our conferences, like a conference like ours, we would hear these complaints all the time. But now these complaints are on center stage and publishers are finally being seen. So thank you, Anthony Vargas, for that article. I think the takeaway here is DOJ isn't just poking around, right? They are digging in and they're going for the blood, right?
They're digging in, but a lot of the testimonial findings are on a global scale, and it seems like the judge only cares about things from a U.S. perspective.
U.S.
So it is going to
Yeah.
be interesting to see the outcome.
Yeah, but I think, you know what I think is going to happen? I think you're talking about how this is only US focused. I think what we're going to see over in EU is with the CMA, right? And we're starting to see a lot of other EU stuff play out. Like I think Apple being fined for some non-competitive practices they're doing, Google trying to fight another fine that is still being held up. So I think just overall, governments globally are saying enough of this BS with big tech.
Although I did see that Google had a victory, 1.66 billion, something with the EU.
They had a victory.
Let me pull it up. Hold on.
Okay.
You guys keep going while I find it.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, what do you think?
I
Do you,
was
do
gonna
you,
say, I
do you-
know on Rapper, you wrote that story last week, and Google and Apple were fined billions of euros, but I didn't see the victory personally. But
Yeah, I didn't see. I know that initially with that Google case, they went back to court, and then that's why the judge decided to let that fine stay. So I'd be very interested in seeing that Google is out here winning. I think also that's telling, Andrew, you just covered this week with the FTC and social media. Like that's another sign to me that like
yeah,
governments are not playing in
yeah,
general.
I feel like a lot of people have been talking about these walled gardens for years, but this is kind of the first time around this era is kind of times, but these things are kind of be broken down now.
Right.
So
Right. And go ahead.
sorry,
You found
I
it?
found stat. Google wins challenge against 1.66 billion EU antitrust fine.
When was that?
This was about 5 days ago. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I
all
wonder if it
right.
overturned the one we were talking about, or I'm not sure.
It's like,
All right.
you know, Google shouldn't get the confetti out yet, but a win is a win, and they have not seen one in a long time, except for, taking over everybody's money.
Oh, I see it. 5 days ago. How did we miss that one? Wow. All right. So we're going to have to unpack that a little next week when we come back, because I think we should look at the global implications as well,
Or why
right?
do we
Not
have to
just
wait till next week? Maybe we can do it like on Wednesday or something.
that soon. Are you sure?
I mean, by next week, it might be,
Yeah, late news. Yeah, so we could do that. We could find time to dig in and be like midweek global, I don't know, something. What do you guys think? But definitely, yeah, let's take some time and unpack that because I see. Antitrust. It's a search decision too with the European Commission from the 2019 decision. The court upheld most of the commission's assessments, but annulled the decision, imposing a fine of almost 1.5 billion euros on Google. Okay.
1.66 billion.
Yeah, in US, All right. I mean, wow. And this goes back to a complaint from Microsoft in 2010. So you see how long it takes for action to move on these things. Similarly to that other case you were talking about, Yakira, earlier, it takes years and years to move on these things. But I'm thinking, I don't know if you guys are thinking the same, that even if, far be it from me to say that big money wins, but even if the courts come back and say, oh, they don't have to break up, I still think there's going to be major changes in the industry. What do you guys think?
I think if the court comes back and says they don't have to break up, it'll be just like if Donald Trump wins the presidency.
I mean, I'm kind of half and half on it because I feel like the industry has been complaining about Google and some of their practices for so long, and they haven't really changed much then. So if they aren't given the decision to have to break up, then why would they do anything different, you know? But
yeah, because if they don't break them up, they're still going to be a monopoly. So they're still going to be like a dictator, like
Right,
that other man I just mentioned.
right. But you don't think that, nah, forget it. I won't. I won't go there. Maybe I'll save it for next week. Maybe I'll save it for next week. All right. So that's where we are this week. Publishers are finally being seen, but is it enough? Is it enough?
All right now. Take care.
See you next time.
bye, guys.